Thank you for the possibility to speak about e-translation and the domain of public procurement. It's not just about e-procurement, but it's about public procurement. Before I start, I was listening very much to this presentation from you, Agnieszka, and I think when we look at Europe, we can see the countries are very different. I'm doing workshops in all the member states, and every member state is very different. Now I'm doing a very provocative thing. Now is we try with European directives, European regulations to harmonize how we deal with certain issues in the member states to create the single market. And when listening to what you said, Agnieszka, I think it could be a possibility to think about harmonizing the language as well. But maybe that's for future generations. For the agenda, I will speak a little bit about the aim, about the tools that we have, scenarios for e-translations in the domain of public procurement or e-procurement, and the next steps. First of all, our aim. The aim, I'm working in the directorate of DG GROW, who are responsible for the public procurement directives. And our unit is especially in charge of e-procurement. So how can public procurement be done through using electronic tools? And the main aim that we have in our directorate is to really create a single market. Currently, there is about, let's say, a very small, limited percentage doing really cross-border procurement. But especially when you go to the borders of the countries, you can see that there is a lot of cross-border participation. And as in any domain, there are many challenges. The legal requirements are different. We have the public procurement directives, which have then to be implemented into national legislation. And the main difference is that the language is different. And this is something where e-translation can help to, especially suppliers, to open up the market. Just imagine if you are the first step in the procedure is to identify, is a public procurement procedure something that I would be interested in to participate? And this is especially the use case which I would see is very important for e-translation in the domain of public procurement. The tools, we as a Commission, we provide several tools. First of all, TED, it's the Publications Office. There, every procedure above a certain threshold must be published there. We have the European Single Procurement Document and a tool called eCertis. I will speak about those tools now. So, first of all, the tool TED. It's notifications of business opportunities. They have around 12,000 visitors every day, and there are 5 possibilities for 500,000 contracts each year with a volume of 450 billion euro. So TED is an extremely important information tool for buyers, for suppliers to identify if there is an important opportunity. And as you can see, they already use e-translations. Can you just give me... Thank you. So what you can see here is if you are registered in TED, which is very easy, you have the possibility to click Request a New Translation on any kind of notice. Then you have the possibility to select the target language, and then it will be sent to you via email. As machine translation, they use still the machine translation. It can take some time. That's the reason why they send it via email. But it's very useful. And it is something that I couldn't show now, but which is very interesting, is to see they offer the tool, and it's interesting to see which country, or from which language it is translated into another language. This helps us to understand where are the links between the different countries. So this is a very important aspect of using machine translation or e-translations, is to get a better understanding which countries are closer to each other. When I did the workshops in all the member states, it was very interesting to see that certain countries have a very close relationship with other countries. For example, if you are in Finland and Estonia, those two countries do very much public procurement procedures, not together, but you have companies from both countries participating in each other countries. So machine translation or e-translation is not only useful to translate things, but it's also important to understand how Europe works, how there are ties between the different countries. Another tool that we use is the European Civil Procurement document. Probably no one of you have ever seen it, but if you are going to participate in a public procurement procedure above threshold, it's very likely that you will see this self-declaration. It's called self-declaration, but it's a very sophisticated self-declaration. It is mandatory to be used above thresholds. It's available in all the official languages, and something which is very nice because DGT only provides the languages to the official languages. We have countries like Norway and Iceland using this tool as well. So we provide ESPD as well in those languages, and it was translated by the countries themselves. We will connect it, or we already have it connected to eCertis, which I will speak in a minute. And while this tool is extremely popular, it's one of the most used services currently offered by the Commission. We will phase it out to push the member states to set up their own ESPD service. So e-translation can be as well very helpful for the ESPD to use, but to be used by service providers, not by us anymore. And just to give you an example, you can't read it, but maybe just to give you an idea. The text that you see here is from the European Single Procurement document. It's translated in all the languages. And this is about supply chain management. And we allow the possibility that the authorities can provide the specific requirements in their own language. So this one is described as supply chain management methodology, practices, and software tools. So this is a requirement for a public procurement procedure, and it's just a text field. So this can be easily translated by e-translation or machine translation to help the supplier to understand what do I have to provide. As well, for the answers, e-translations can be used for the buyer. Now coming to the tool eCertis. I know you're not familiar with the tools and you probably will never ever hear about them again, but at least for our domain they are very important. eCertis is a tool to understand the need, to understand how a company can fulfill a specific requirement. So in Germany, you need to have something called Strafregisterauszug. But in the UK, you don't have this kind of certificate. There you can use a simple self-declaration. So what eCertis does is, for all the member states and EFTA countries, they are providing for each criteria how a company can prove that they fulfill a certain criteria. So it's a huge, it's a mapping tool between them. And something that we are very happy with, I'm not sure if I should be happy anymore after Agnieszka said English is actually the worst pivot language. But all the member states provide the information in English, but also in the national languages. We have currently 1,400 data sets there. And we tried for this tool to have as much as structured information. Because if you have structured information, the translation will be much easier. And we plan to connect eCertis to eTranslation next year. Now, what we will do is, here you can see a criterion, the name in the country as well. They call it insolvency. This is a free text, which can then be translated into all the other languages. Also, each country provides a description of the country, of the criteria. So this can be translated as well. But most of the other texts cannot be translated because they are just fixed or already translated. Another example for the evidence. We have a name that is given by the member state. This is just a free text that could be translated. We have code lists, something that might be more and more important in the future when we do not only translations but for any kind of data. While 20 years ago, you would have all the procurement documents just in unformatted Word documents. We are moving more and more into the area of structured information. The more structured information we have, the better we can translate it. And here you can see most of the information for the evidences are already can be translated automatically. But we have a huge text field for each evidence where the country can say, for this evidence we have some additional information which did not fit anywhere else. So this is a free text again. And this could be used by eTranslation as well. For scenarios for eTranslations, for the suppliers, and I think eTranslation can be a deal breaker in the future for suppliers, especially small and medium companies who wish to participate abroad. It's to identify business opportunities, for example, on TED or in their eProcurement system, to help them to understand the requirements that they have to fulfill. Because for each procedure, there are specific requirements that they have to fulfill. And this is something, an area where eTranslation can as well help. Something that is more sophisticated, but something that could be still used for eTranslation is the actual procurement documents, which is currently mostly unstructured Word documents. So this is something where eTranslation can help. For the buyers, and again, the member states are dealing with languages in a very different way. For example, in Portugal, if a company wants to participate from anywhere all over the world, they have to use a certified translator for Portuguese to translate everything into Portuguese. if you go, for example, to Germany, it's left to the authority. So the authority can say, if you submit certain documents in English, I don't care. Usually they would want to have it in German, of course, but it's left to the authority. So this requirement is also very different, and probably something where e-translation could help as well in the future is to say that for companies, the bar, how they have to translate it, can be lowered. That they say, okay, you can provide it in your native language, and we use e-translation that is sufficient for us to see if you fulfill a certain criteria. A scenario where I personally do not see for the time being how e-translation can be used is to actually, for the actual offer. This has to be, for the next years, I still would see that you really need to have a translator to translate it into the language the country or the authority asks it to. But especially for the first part, for the supplier to say, this is a procedure I'm really interested in. So I put effort into this bit, and I might use even a translator to help me to work on this. I think e-translation could be really a deal breaker. For the next steps, we want to implement e-translation into e-Certis by the third quarter of next year. We will try to see how e-translation works together with procurement documents. We will try to set up a link between the Belgian government and the Commission, DGT service, because they have to provide the procurement documents in 2 languages, in French and in Dutch. So this might be a useful input for you to collect data. And I think they have a lot of data in those 2 languages. And something else that we want to do is we want to raise the awareness of e-translation in the member states and to try to push them to integrate e-translation into their tools, because the most important thing is, from a mindset, is to say you can accept or you can use different languages if you have the right tools. And now maybe one of the most important thing I would see for the procurement domain or eProcurement of e-translation is, and I think yesterday it was mentioned as well with Google Translate. There is Google Translate. What is the difference between Google Translate and e-translation? And for us, I would say the most important aspect is the IPR. If you use Google Translate, even though they would provide a better quality, maybe not, maybe yes, it would mean that they can use this text. If someone uses e-translation, the IPR is residing for the authorities or for the suppliers who are using the tool. And this is, for us, a very critical aspect. Just to give you an example, we work together with CEN, the European Standardization Organization. But currently we do not, for example, hand over the ESPD, our document, to them to create a standard. And the reason we don't do this is because of IPR. As soon as currently it's free, anyone can use it. We have no issues with IPR, and it's free for use. But as soon as we hand over to CEN, it gets a CEN stamp on it. It costs money, and the IPR resides within CEN, and we cannot use it. And we currently have a huge issue with electronic invoices, where we officially ask CEN to develop a semantic standard, And now some member states are having issues with the IPR using the standard. Even for us in the Commission, we cannot just take the standard and create our own, let's say, training tools, because the IPR resides within CEN. So the biggest advantage of using e-translation, I personally would see, is the IPR. And with that, I will finish my presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very enlightening talk. It's another domain, and maybe you're getting an idea of what kind of massive impact well-working e-translation can have in these domains, in e-justice, in e-procurement. It's not just that it helps translators and citizens maybe to better understand texts, but there's businesses behind, there's buyers involved, suppliers who can all benefit from this opportunity, they will just be able to work better, to work more efficiently, to deal with the offers more efficiently. So that's why we collect the data, why we try to make e-translation and the public services work better.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. There were some acronyms or abbreviations you used, and for me the CEN is familiar, but maybe not for all of us, and for me RPR is not at all familiar. I think it would help to get your explanation for these two. Thank you.
It's the intellectual property rights. So IPR stands for intellectual property rights. And if we, as the Commission, currently provide a data model on the European Single Procurement Document, it's free, we have all the rights, and anyone can use it for free without any problems. As soon as we hand it over to the European Standardization Organization, they will put their intellectual property rights on it. And with that, if you want to reuse the output, you have to buy the standard. And that is a huge issue. I hope this answered your question.
Thank you for your talk. You were stressing the importance of structured data for possibly supporting translation. And I know from business reporting that they're also using taxonomy across borders to identify concepts and then put them with multilingual labels. So I was wondering, could we have access to this kind of structured data as well? Is this a role that would be helpful?
Yes, we have, it was very interesting for the, we use an open source management tool, GitHub, to disseminate information about the European Single Procurement Document. And there we have all the translation files, which we will send to Andrea and to Alexandra, and then they can disseminate this information. Maybe there's one thing that I would like to say, and it's so interesting. It's not just about feeding the system, but also to correct the system, the answers. It was when we provided the public procurement directives on the electronic invoicing, there was one sentence in the English wording saying something like, any one of the syntaxes must be implemented. Any one of the syntaxes, so what someone has to implement, has to be implemented. And in some languages it was translated, and what it means is actually you have to understand all of the syntaxes. But in some member states it was translated in the national language into, in German it was einer der beiden, or einer der. So this leads to confusion. So we need to update the directive to correct the sentence. And something that we can see, for example, for our ESPD service that we provide not only as a data model, but also as an online service, is we are receiving feedback from the member states to say, well, this translation is not really correct. Could you update this translation? And we are doing this, because in the end, it's really about the normal users understanding it. And unfortunately, the legalistic language that we use, even in the ESPD, is not known to suppliers and to buyers, and that is a huge drawback. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a quick question. What does CEN stand for? Just the first part of my question, please.
Oh, I think it's French.
Comité européen de normalisation.
Thank you very much.
I'm just as in the dark there as I was when I asked the question. Could you repeat that, please?
Comité européen de normalisation, where normalization means standardization.
Thank you very much. And the second part of my question just reverts to the point. Sean is my name. I'm a translator with the State Translation Service in Ireland, just to see where I'm coming from. So I sympathise with the freelance translators and also with our own translation service. The point about the English language being a difficult relay language, I think one of the suggestions that I would make to our experts at the table, maybe on the design of the e-translation service itself, that rather than, if you like, and I'm not suggesting for a second that you would be dumbing down, but rather than actually attenuating the information you would furnish in terms of glosses and explanations for terminology basis, if that could be extended and expanded even with a kind of etymological link towards the source of the country where the language, if it's a legal term, is coming from. Because the translation skill itself is very akin, if not identical. In fact, there are formal structures now where you have lawyer linguists who are both translators and lawyers. So those skills have always been akin to each other, and translators, and I think Agnieszka would probably agree with this, that the more information translators receive, the easier their job is once they can see the source and the base, and they would be very, in fact, interested in learning more about these different language systems rather than, or legal systems, I beg your pardon, the Roman civil and the English common law system, which you have the duality of systems. And you're enhancing the whole European project, I think, because you're creating a global understanding of all of the different complementary legal systems that operate in all of the different EU states. So the basic point I'm making here is to expand the actual explanatory glosses and explanations and sources as to where this information is coming from. People's overall understanding then can be greatly enhanced. That's what I would. Now I know that involves resources and funding, but I think it's better, more is better, I think, in this instance. Thank you very much.
I have probably no time anymore, but coming back to what you said, in the future we will have more and more structured information, and the Publications Office provides actually numerous code lists. A code list is used for the computers to, for example, to specify the countries. And what they do is, I just take the country. So they provide it in different formats. And what they do is, they actually provide it in all the languages, at least in all the official languages. So the MDR website of the Publications Office is a very useful tool for getting a lot of different code lists that are used not only in the public procurement domain, but in any kind of a domain. So if you just type in MDR and Publications Office in your Google, then you will find it.